think that's what she said, but no one listened.
Oh my God. Is that something, John?
Hey Sandy, how are you? Nice
Is that
to see
something
you.
we're all in, or is this gonna be another change?
No, I think
Yes,
this is
because
the
then
voter guide. I think
Then
I
they
saw
trip
your
and fall
photo.
down because they're, you know, it's mostly the performance.
Where'd you get it?
I just see.
Oh, hey, oh, you sitting here? I just want to see your photo. Who has it? Let's see your photo. Oh, that doesn't look like you were 10 years ago. Come on. That's misleading. That's misleading. This is misleading. This is deception.
Are we filming?
I think so. Use the 10-year-old photo. It's deceptive. That's deceptive.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Ann Williams, and as president of the League of Women Voters of Santa Monica, I would like to welcome you to the third Supervisorial District Candidates Forum for the June 3rd election. We are delighted that you could join us. It's always satisfying for us to see voters who take their responsibility seriously enough to get the best information they can before they cast their votes. It is our firm belief that democracy can only thrive when its citizens are fully informed. That's why during the 80 years we've been active in our community, we've provided forums to familiarize Santa Monica voters with the candidates who hope to represent them, and to provide the candidates an opportunity to make their positions and policies clear. If you would like to participate in the League of Women Voters, please talk to one of us after the forum or see our website at lwvsantamonica.org. That's lwvsantamonica.org. We're always happy to have involved citizens like you join us. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Sandy Jacobson.
Thank you, Ann. Good morning. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this Candidates Forum at the Edie Second Stage here in Santa Monica. Our goal today is to help you become more familiar with candidates for the LA County Board of Supervisors District 3. Today's forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Santa Monica and LA Up. The League and LA Up are both nonpartisan, nonprofit organizations. Neither organization supports or opposes candidates for political office. We do, however, encourage you to study the candidates, study the issues, and educate yourselves and cast an informed vote on June 3rd. Today you will be hearing from 5 candidates for the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, District 3. We are delighted they're able to be with us, and we look forward to a lively and informative forum. The Los Angeles County Charter calls for a 5-member Board of Supervisors, which fulfills 3 major powers in county government: executive, legislative, and quasi-judicial. Supervisors make decisions that affect millions of poor and needy who are dependent on a wide range of county social services, as well as taxpayers, business and organized labor, and others. They make decisions on law enforcement, healthcare delivery, libraries, food safety regulation, taxes, and land development that can affect a population larger than of all but 7 states. They spend $25 billion a year in public money, and yet few in LA County are familiar with who they are and what they do. Hopefully today's forum will help answer the question, what do supervisors do? In March 2002, Los Angeles County voters passed Measure B with a majority of 64% to limit the terms of the supervisors to 3 consecutive 4-year terms. So in 2014, Supervisors Gloria Molina and Zev Yaroslavsky are termed out of office. The candidates you see before you this morning are vying for Zev Yaroslavsky's 3rd district seat. The election for LA County Board of Supervisors will take place as part of the statewide primary election on June 3rd. If one candidate does not receive more than 50% of the votes, then the top 2 vote getters will run against each other in November. The candidate elected by the voters will serve a 4-year term of office beginning in January 2015. This candidates forum is being recorded for rebroadcast on LAUP's YouTube channel by Mobion. I would like now to introduce the candidates to you and go over the format we'll be using for this forum. The candidates are, in alphabetical order, John Duran, Sheila Kuehl, Eric Preven, Bobby Shriver before the forum. The opening statements will be followed by a series of questions and answers. The first set of questions will be asked by a panel of representatives from the co-sponsoring organization, who will each ask a question. The remaining question time will be used for questions submitted by members of both co-sponsoring organizations in advance of the forum, which as moderator I will read. Because we have 5 candidates with a variety of approaches, all of the questions will be answered by all of the candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. The order of questions will be
Education, preschool, and childcare, which are very different from each other. But one of the things I was able to do was to pass the only paid family leave bill in the country. And that was a sort of a oar in the water to help families have time to bond with new children, including fathers who had not had any paid time to do so. But we also fought every year to keep child care funds in the budget, especially for CalWORK recipients. And that was very difficult. But we did learn very clearly the difference between child care and early childhood education. And I look forward to this debate, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate.
Thank you, Sheila. Eric, please.
Yes, my name is Eric Preven, and I'm known by some as a county watchdog and a vocal critic of the Los Angeles County governments and the Board of Supervisors. I'm from Studio City and lived in the Valley for 29 years. I grew up on the East Coast and come from a family of 3. And my father is a psychiatrist, and we've been very keenly focused on some of these early education issues. And I would say that this issue of early education is so important to the Los Angeles County residents, and so many of our problems that are in the field of law enforcement and poverty and inequality are frankly could be dramatically remedied with additional support and funding for the early education programs. I think it's no longer, this debate is settled. This is an incredibly important piece of the puzzle, and I personally believe that, this type of early education should almost be, in the Bill of Rights here in America and around the world, because it's such an enormous determinant on a life. And my role as a watchdog ties into that, because a tremendous amount of this work is done by LA County. And I believe that we can continue to do great work with groups like LA, but we can improve the work we're doing by finding savings, because there are lots of decisions that are made just out of public view and that are same old, and have not been as effective as I hope. Thank you.
Thank you. John Duran, please.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here this morning. My name is John Duran. I'm a council member in the city of West Hollywood, and like Sheila and I actually have the same amount of service. We've both been in public service now for 14 years. Unlike Sheila, however, Sheila has been serving in Sacramento. I've been a local government official for 14 years. And that's, in fact, what this race is about, a local office. I guess because I have 14 years of voting records, if you want to know how I govern in the future, you have 14 years of records to look at of how I voted in the past. And I can tell you that my city is only 30 years old, so for half of my city's life, I have been there building a city. My city has a AAA bond rating that's higher than the United States of America. The county of Los Angeles only has a AA bond rating. My city has $100 million in reserves. The entire county of Los Angeles has $200 million. Meaning that my small town of 37,000 people has half of what the entire county of Los Angeles has. And because of that, during the great economic recession of 2008, we didn't have to lay off one employee. We didn't have to cut back one program. And I actually asked our head of Department of Public Works, what is the average lifespan of a pothole in my city? He said, well, 6 hours, sir. And I said, that's fantastic. He said, no, bad day is 24 hours. That's the difference between my city and the city next door called Los Angeles. I hope that this morning we're able to talk about the three issues I care about most: transportation, jails, sheriffs, and probation, public safety, and finally an overhaul of the entire infrastructure of Los Angeles County government. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Bobby Shriver, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I served on the city council here in Santa Monica for 8 years, and I'm happy to see so many friends here who I met during that service. Everything that John said about West Hollywood is true about Santa Monica. We're competitive. We do this all the time. We have a AAA bond rating. We have the reserves. We didn't lay off a single person. We kept our programs up. And in addition, we gave money to the school system here in Santa Monica, much of which was used, as I'm sure you and others know, in early childhood education and in education in the 3 Title I schools that are in Santa Monica. I think of myself as a problem solver. Prior to my service in government, I solved problems for nonprofits that help people. I solved problems for the Special Olympics, which my mom started by making a series of records that enabled her to expand that program. I solved problems here in Santa Monica, as some of you know, with the beach, the 80-acre beach site falling into disrepair. We built the beach house there. Santa Monica Beach under the pier was the most polluted beach in the state. We were able to put a storm drain in and clean that up. You can now swim there without getting sick. Excuse me. We worked on homelessness here. Homelessness in the streets of Santa Monica is down versus in Los Angeles County and other cities in LA, homelessness is up. It's because of many of the strategies that the council supported, including rapid rehousing. We built a lot of affordable housing here. That's a key to that. We worked on veterans homelessness housing, where we're beginning to see some progress. Too late, but we're beginning to see some. I stuck to that issue, and I hope have made it work. Look forward to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Pamela, please.
Thank you. Good morning. First, I want to thank our sponsors. You guys are to be applauded for all the work you do to give back to our kids in our county. My name is Pamela Conley-Hewlick, and I was born in Kansas and raised back in the days when a middle-class working family could make ends meet. I'm proud to say we were able to qualify for the Head Start program, and I took advantage of that. And I'm very grateful for that because I believe kids are wired from 2 to 5. They're hardwired. And that is such an important time in their life to do whatever we can to give them the most so they can be the most successful later on. I grew up, I was able to go to UC San Diego. I came here when I was 17, graduated from UCSD. While I was there, I did an internship and worked with Pat Schroeder in Capitol Hill back in the days when she was still trying to get the Family Medical Leave Act passed. Federal government didn't happen when they were in the 80s. But I applaud Sheila for what she did for the state of California. And I was able to take advantage of the FMLA when I was working as a lawyer for the Screen Actors Guild. I also served in-house for the Directors Guild. I had 2 small children, and I was able to spend some time with them. After 9/11, my priorities shifted, I'm sure like many of you. And when I went back to work with my 4-month-old, I had to make a choice. I asked to go part-time. I was in-house with the union, so I could spend more time with my young children who were 2 and 4 months old. The union said it was a dangerous precedent that I could not go part-time. If I went part-time, everyone would have to go. I had to make a choice. I chose my children.
Thank you, Pamela.
Sorry.
Now we'll go on to the questions. Our first 2 questions will be asked by representatives of our co-sponsoring organizations. Again, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. Joanne Levitt from the League of Women Voters of Santa Monica representative will ask the first question.
Many things affect the healthy growth and development of young children. Those in foster care are the responsibility of the county.
That they had made for solving the problem that you asked. Only one was a new idea under the sun he used, and from my perspective, I said, which one? And they never responded. But the reality is, these problems have persisted for a while, and the silo mentality in Los Angeles County government that I've been working diligently week in, week out, I'll be there Tuesday before the next League of Women Voters debate, to weigh in on S1, which is Philip Browning version of the requested changes. But to give one small idea, I realize I'm running out of time. We need to put kinder care, which is the care of family members of children who are in the current system, get less money to take, and the outcomes are far better. So we need to turn that upside down, and that's what I would do. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Bobby Shriver, please.
Thank you. I think the most important recommendation in the Blue Ribbon Committee Commission document that Pamela will read in a moment. We've all been doing this together so long, we know each other's stories. She reads it very well, by the way. The most important idea in there was to make one person accountable, to have a sort of a czar. I found in Santa Monica that it was very valuable when people knew who was responsible. And they could come up to you in a coffee shop or wherever and say, you're the one, I'm holding you accountable. We don't have that now in the current system. There are too many silos, as Eric referred to, too many different people take a portion of the responsibility. That just doesn't work. It doesn't work in the private sector, and it really doesn't work in the public sector. So that's the number one idea in there that I think should be implemented. The second one is what they call performance-based contracting, which means you get paid, contractors get paid if kids get better, as opposed to they provide services for the kids. It's an idea that's been implemented in other cities very successfully, and it needs to be implemented in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Bobby. Sheila Kuehl, please.
Thank you. The question was really about the Department of Children and Family Services, but also the fact that 4 other agencies in the county have some responsibility for foster kids. And you mentioned justice, where foster youth often are going back and forth between the camps and back into some kind of either family care or group home. The Blue Ribbon Commission did recommend changing the structure, and I support that, so that all agencies who have anything to do with the lives of these children are brought together into one agency. And what the press has termed a czar is really another word for the director of an agency. I think the word czar has some pejorative in it, but I support that. The major thing is to remember that a quarter of foster kids need early childhood education because they're under the age of 5. They need the services that these young children should get, and I support that very strongly.
Thank you, Sheila. Pamela Colney, please.
I think you have to look at all the candidates and ask who is going to take care of our children. These children, most of them in foster care and 1 and under, they don't vote. A lot of them, they don't have money. So you really have to look at that. I have devoted my life to my children and to protecting other children. I also serve on the board for Child Help USA, which is a nonprofit, which was came about 55 years ago. They have 1-800 for a child. One of the things they've done with Child Help in Arizona is they have one location, an advocacy center, where these children who are abused or neglected go to, and all of the other departments come there to watch these children being interviewed. So instead of having to relive these horrors, telling the DA, telling the sheriff, the teachers over and over again, all of the departments go to that child. So I think the first thing we need to do is implement that kind of structure. In addition, it's shocking to me that this report that came out shows that we have the money to deliver health care screenings for children who are detained and 1 and under, and we haven't delivered. It's unconscionable and almost criminal.
Thank you, Pamela. Celia Ayala, the CEO of LAF, will ask the next question.
So take care of our children. As part of the supervisors, you have lots of responsibilities. Dear and near to my heart is the youngest and most vulnerable. And you have an opportunity to be part of the first 5 commission yourselves. You will get an opportunity to appoint commissioners as well as board members to LAF. So these areas are health, safety, and early education. I'd like to hear what are your areas of priorities within those areas, and what do you believe needs to be done to have quality preschool for all children in LA County?
Sheila, will you go first, please?
Well, I don't think there's a need to prioritize among health, safety, and early childhood education. One of the things that you do in leadership, and I learned very much in state because we had a lot to do with these issues, which local government generally does not, is that the power to convene, the power to make a plan, the power to bring together funding streams is extremely important. Healthcare was one of my priorities in the state for many years. I want our children to be healthy, but I don't think we're choosing among early education and health. I think that using the power of the various budget streams and the departments in the county, it's possible to pay attention to all of this. Instead of thinking of the needs of the county in little agencies, let us think of the child as a system. And that child's needs need to be met. So the convening, the bringing together of agencies, bringing together of services, that's what I specialized in terms of drafting ways of doing things, and that's what I would do in the county.
Thank you, Sheila. John, please.
Thank you. It's a tough choice. They're all really important. You brought up the idea of commissioners, and first of all, in looking at my history of appointment of commissioners, I've always tried to balance equally between men and women in different ages and ethnicities, because I think that commissioners should reflect the communities in which they serve. So a lot of times it's not just the person that you're electing, it's who they bring to the table as well. That's important in implementing a lot of these reforms. I think on the issue of health has been a major focus for my city. When my city started having a health department, we couldn't afford to pay for that. So we had to contract out with nonprofit organizations, including the Saban Clinic, the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center, other community clinics. So we learned early on that relying on clinics for the delivery of primary services was part of the safety net to protect those who are most vulnerable. I think now with the passage of the Affordable Care Act that consumers now have the ability to go out and shop for care. But a large group that has been left out are those that are not documented in this country. And unfortunately, we need to make sure that those children get vaccinations as well and are protected from communicable diseases. So making community clinics for all of our community, I think, is really important.
Thank you. Eric, please.
Yes, I would for sure make a priority the idea of advocating for the public's point of view, which is something that I have been doing on the First Five Commission. I have participated enough to know that the First Five had been studied and they were underfunding, which was not by some kind of wrongdoing, but it was a bungle, because that money could have been applied to the very serious concerns that we've all been talking about. And worse, the Board of Supervisors have been not acquiescent, but looking away slightly, which is a big problem with government versus advocacy, at some of the problems with the way the money is distributed. A specific example is the Community Development Commission on September 24th, 2013 was given another $10 million on top of a $15 million sum to distribute through NOFA, and yet a great portion of that money is administrative fees to that county agency. It upsets some of the supervisors, and it upsets me because that money to use in entertainment and expression needs to be put on the screen. We need to make sure that this funding gets into the needy programs that we have set up. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Pamela, please.
Yeah, I disagree with Sheila, because if you read the report, actually, what this Blue Ribbon Task Force recommends is that we first articulate a county-wide mission to prioritize and improve child safety. So I would have to say safety is the most important feature that we have to look at. If I'm elected to serve you, these children are going to come first. And I vow to every one of you here and every child who can't vote, I will work to represent them. So I would first work in those safety measures. The second thing we have to do is improve the educational opportunities. We have to look at more nonprofits, to partner with more nonprofits who can provide great Head Start programs, alternative after care, after school services, for example. Working mothers and fathers need help. In order to keep their jobs, they need a place that those young children can go to after 3 p.m. And we, as a county, need to make sure we can address that need and adequately provide that opportunity so those kids can be in a safe place after school as well.
Thank you, Pamela. Bobby?
Thank you. One of the really hard facts that you learn, and it's just shocking, is that the social workers who work with young kids work at about a 40-to-1 ratio. The best practice in our country is 15-to-1. There are open slots in the county budget to hire social workers, but they haven't been successful at hiring them because many people don't want to do the work, and their hiring requirements were wrong, in my judgment. We need to improve the prestige, really, of the people who are working with kids. I think that's a very important matter. As to First Five, of course, I'm happy that both Rob and Michelle Reiner, the founders of First Five, have supported me. I remember back when they were thinking about doing that initiative, thinking what a great idea it was. Although I now, as I've thought more about it, think that the idea that we depend on smoking for the funding is a dangerous precedent, as I know we all hope that people will stop smoking and that funding stream will decline. So one of the important things in the 12 years that whoever gets elected here will do is to figure out where large sums of money will come into preschool to replace the smoking money.
Thank you, Bobby. The remaining time will be used for questions submitted by members of both co-sponsoring organizations in advance of this forum. As moderator, I will be asking these questions. So listen up. We have heard stories of situations in county projects where some of the children are in early care programs while other children in the same housing project look wistfully through the windows. How should the county serve low-income children ages 0 to 5 who are living in county-supported low-income housing? Eric, will you lead us off?
Well, I think this comes down to seats in the facilities, and this is exactly what they're facing now in New York. Mr. de Blasio did a spectacular job by putting 20,000 additional seats, and the challenge, I think, is exactly what you reference, is the equity issue. We need to make sure that the children who need those seats can have access to them. And so the way you would have to do that, of course, is to go sleeves rolled up into each of these programs and be sure that if additional rental space is needed and if additional teachers or caregivers are required, that those are set up. We do spend a lot of time circling around with developers. I've tracked one issue for a YWCA co-sponsored project that, for me, went on for years in converting a supermarket into a care center, and it was completely outrageous that it took so long, and year coming back, and some of the money gets siphoned off. And so, again, this is a critically important job, and I would go right into the weeds, as I do on a weekly basis, of the specific you're talking about. If a kid in Jordan Downs can't get it, thank you.
Thank you. Pamela.
Yeah, I think this is we're going to have to be creative, and we're going to have to think outside of the box. We're going to have to think outside of the traditional methods of getting these children 0 to 5 into great facilities. One of the best kept secrets in LA County is we have 85 libraries. Why aren't we opening them up in the daytime so we can serve these 0 to 5 population? Our library has story time, and that's how I started to get involved in the city council, was to make our library better. But every library throughout the county is an asset. We need to figure out a way where these kids who are in these projects can get to those libraries and get a great opportunity to learn to read, to love to read, to get information. I think the libraries are going to be, if I'm elected, going to be the new center that we're going to give a chance for everyone to, when they enter there, they will not only find knowledge, but they'll find love. And when they walk into those library doors, they can go anywhere in the world, regardless of where they're living. So if I'm elected, what I'm going to do is be creative and look at those different types of solutions for this issue.
Thank you, Pamela. Sheila.
Thank you. Well, I think, first of all, as a supervisor, you would not need to convince me that early childhood education for young people in impoverished areas is important. There's plenty of data. They stay in school longer. They don't become teen parents as often. More of them go to college. Less criminal activity. It's very important. So what does that mean? That means it's worth the investment. I want every child in these projects to have access to early childhood education, not just childcare. And that means money for training. That means money for quality early childhood education. It means money for low ratios, so that it's not just a matter of 35 kids and somebody, sitting with them all day. And the money, I believe, is there. Budgets are a matter of priorities. I voted on 14 different budgets and worked on them through many years. It's just a matter of saying, this is an important aspect, and I think we can do it.
Thank you, Sheila. Bobby.
I think your question had to do with people living in particular types of housing, and my general philosophy is that these people are my clients. They're my partners. I'm working for them, and I would put the services where they are. I think it's very difficult, particularly for single-parent households, to get to services if they have to travel, as much as we're all going to work hard on improving the transit system in LA County. I think the closer these services are to the places people live, the better. I think there's a movement in healthcare to put healthcare services on school grounds in both middle and upper school, particularly mental health services, where we've had a tremendous deficit of mental health services being present on school campuses. The current system is that you have to drive if you have a serious matter. You have to drive to a mental health care clinic, whereas if it's provided in a school, it's much more accessible, the stigma is less, and so forth. I think for younger kids who are living in housing, we have to put the services in the housing or walking distance. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult for people to get to them.
Thank you, Bobby. John, please.
Equality under the law, let's just start with that as a basic premise to start with, and that means not knowing any class differences, along with race, ethnicity, and religion. I was very fortunate. I have a mama bear. My mom is a very aggressive Latina mother, and so being a very aggressive Latina mother, she was always pushing ahead, make sure her kids got the best of everything, including preschool and early education. And one of the, even though she's under 5 feet tall, I'll tell you, a lot of giants are under 5 feet tall, right? Sheila, my mom and Sheila are actually friends, but she's quite a dynamo. The issue is really how these families cluster. And the problem with projects is if you cluster people in poverty in single projects, then you create additional problems. My city has a 20% set aside in all new residential development, making sure that 20% of all new housing units are set aside for low-income and very low-income families. That way people of different classes are integrated in the same communities and have equal access to all of these services. So I think you have to look at how families initially end up in neighborhoods and communities and make sure that we don't cluster poverty in areas.
Thank you, John. Okay, the next question. Recently, the Blue Ribbon Commission on Child Protection unanimously concluded that a state of emergency exists in LA County, which requires a fundamental transformation of the current child protection system. Do you agree with the recommendations made by the Commission? If yes, what would be your very first course of action to implement the recommendations? If not, what would you do instead? Please be specific. All right, first one to be specific will be Bobby Shriver.
I agree with the Commission's recommendations. I think they did a tremendous job. They united many of the most significant leaders in town. They worked hard over a long period of time. And I guess like Eric, was a little dismayed to see their report criticized when it was finally put out. I think, as I said earlier, the most important recommendation is to make someone in charge. Whether you call them a czar or a department head, whatever it is, they need to be in charge. And the board needs to hold that person accountable in a public way and to support them in making things change up. We did a fairly similar thing here in Santa Monica, where the homelessness policy was, I would say, in some bit of disarray when I got elected. And because I had run on reforming the homelessness policy and because I had won by a significant margin, I think the community and the staff came together around some new ideas. I think a similar thing has to happen here. When people see a new person elected who has a certain kind of energy and change history, people will change because they will see that the voters have voted for that and the person has a sense of urgency to make it happen.
Thank you, Bobby. Sheila, please.
Well, I think we've indicated, several of us, that we do support the recommendations of the Commission. As I said earlier, I want to form the kind of consortium that includes the 5 agencies from the county who are already providing services. Where I would have liked to see the Commission go farther is that they did not talk very much about the Los Angeles County Office of Education and the role that education and education services plays as well in terms of these children, and it's a big part of their lives. I think healthcare, mental health, these agencies coming together, very important. Again, though, I think the issue is whether you have a record of leadership, whether you have a record of being a change agent, of working with movements that have created new policies. That, I think, has been my history, serving this community in the state for 14 years and before and after. I chaired the Sojourn Shelter for Battered Women, chaired the Ocean Park Community Center, doing actual homeless services actually in Santa Monica. Thank you.
John, please.
Yes, and agreeing with the recommendations, but as our current supervisor, Zev Yaroslavsky, said, that the problem is that a lot of these recommendations are the same recommendations that other Blue Ribbon Task Force have also put forward. So we keep coming up with the same recommendations over and over again. The problem is in execution. We're just not willing to move forward with the recommendations. Specifically 3, ratio, as Bobby has already brought up, the amount of children that each social worker has to supervise is unmanageable. They're not set up to win from the very beginning. So that means increasing social workers in the county department and also contracting with nonprofit private sector to bring in additional workers to do this. Secondly, as I already mentioned in my opening remarks or earlier remarks, the front end to the back end to the front end, making sure the more senior and veteran social workers are out in the field in the communities. And 3, updating their systems. It's case management at the end of the day, and many of the systems are failing those in charge of these departments. I don't agree with the idea of a czar, because I think that means deflecting responsibility to somebody else. Czars tend to have authority to go horizontally and vertically. No supervisor's giving up his or her authority.
Thank you, John. Pamela, please.
I think we all know when there's a will, there's going to be a way. And right now, at least 3 of the Board of Supervisors have not prioritized children and implementing all the recommendations that were made. I can vow to you that I have not only the will, but also the way. Every single one of the Board of Supervisors has something that is referred to by some as a slush fund, other as just money they can do whatever they want without any public input. So what I would do is use all that money, maybe give some to homeboys too, but I would use my slush fund and put it towards implementing all of the recommendations. It's important to know that this Blue Ribbon Task Force had 15 public hearings, met with over 300 individuals, and one of the constant things they heard is that the people who are being affected were not feeling heard. So what I will do is when I am up sitting on that board, I will listen to people. They didn't have to contribute to my campaign. I will listen to them anyway.
Thank you, Pamela. Eric, please.
Yeah. The DCFS and the Public Health Group each have about 80 public health nurses, nurses who will deal with this very early population when they're in crisis. Unfortunately, the public health nurses cannot be deployed the way we need them to because of the way they're tied to the funding. I would immediately get into this, and I tried already to work with the Public Health Group on understanding that problem as we speak. The other issue is, as John mentioned, sending very junior social workers into the community is a bungle. We need to send people who can make the decisions properly, and that can be easily, not easily, but it can be forcefully implemented. The other thing is I would not secure the CEO's office to oversee this group. Mr. Yaroslavsky dissed the idea of a 20-person commission because nobody wants a brand new agency, but the commission should be formed from the existing silos, and it should be populated by decision-making individuals who are there based on merit. And then we can bring some, because there are so many smart people working in our system, is so frustrated by its clumsy setup. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, very long question coming up. This question focuses in further on the work of the Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS, that you guys have already alluded to, specifically now the foster care system. Many foster kids are placed with grandparents or other relatives who then do not receive enough financial support from the county. Studies show that $8,000 a year is enough to cover expenses of relatives caring for foster children, compared to $100,000 per year to keep a foster child in a group home. Some foster relatives may be eligible for CalWORKS funding, but because this money is controlled by a different county department from the one that places the children in homes, relative caregivers rarely know about it. If elected, what will you do to remedy this and make child welfare a priority across all county departments and not just at the DCFS? Sheila.
Well, I think the issue of decision-making, which was just referred to, is really it. A supervisor must make a decision. If you bring 20 people together and you say, you make a decision, it actually doesn't work that way. What you want is for people to have the best recommendations possible, but the people elected are the ones to make the decision. So what I would do is to say our children are the priority, especially the least, the most impoverished among us. And I believe that grandparents and relative caregivers should be given exactly the same payment that non-relatives are given. The thing that I heard more and more and more in Sacramento from people across the aisle is, well, these people, their relatives, they should be taking care of them for nothing, as though it doesn't cost anything to take care of children. But you have to value those families. You have to value those caretakers, because they're the ones that know the children already, and I would make that a high priority.
Thank you, Sheila. Pamela.
Yeah, I think it's important, first of all, we go back to implementing this report, because this report on page 7 addresses that issue. And what it says is that we need to give more financial support. There's been disrespectful treatment by social workers of the people who are taking these people in, so we need to show respect to those people and those grandparents that are taking in those kids. There's a lack of information about the resources and services. So I think what we need to do is, that child is like gold. We need to treat that child with every aspect within the department like we value them. And so when they go from their parents to their grandparents, the social worker is there to help them, to get that CalWorks money for them. They don't maybe it's a different department, but we all look at that child. Every department will look at that child, and that child is the most precious resource we have as a county. So I think whoever's elected needs to put that child first and have the money flow with the child wherever they go. And if I'm elected, that's what I'm going to do, is implement these recommendations.
Thank you, Pamela. Bobby, please.
Thank you. Just sitting here listening to this reminds me of my own 5-year-old child, and the passion that you hear from both Sheila and Pamela, how that arises in you if you've had a child or you have a 5-year-old. That just the idea that this is being badly managed makes your blood boil, honestly. I think it, as others have said, comes down a lot to leadership. I think whoever is the boss, who's making the decision, as Sheila puts it, but also who has had a record of urgency, I would say, sets a tone in the way any organization works. I hope that my record of having set tones of urgency will be communicated to the people in these departments. I absolutely will not put up with it, as my mom used to say. I will not put up with it if the thing isn't done right. I just will pound the table and go crazy because it's just unacceptable. So I know that's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but listening to that just made me want to say it.
Thank you, Bobby. John, please.
Long question and a short answer from me. Yes, of course, I would expand the CalWorks funding to include relatives as caregivers. That's easy. I think that one of the interesting things about this supervisorial district, we have the very, very rich in this district who have nannies who get on buses up and down Santa Monica and Sunset Boulevard to get to homes, who are taking care of children. And then we have families that are very poor or reliant on government services. My mom and dad both worked full-time when my brothers and sister and I were kids, and my grandmother raised us. And I think that dynamic still exists today. I mean, we can't talk about these issues without talking about income inequality and some of the issues around rich and poor and class and race, and realize that for a lot of parents, they don't have any choice but both of them to work just to make basic services, basic living essentials in place, rent and food. And so we have to be able to think outside of the box about non-traditional families. And non-traditional families may mean a grandparent, an aunt, a cousin, somebody else raising the kids who should have access to that funding just as easily.
Thank you, John. Eric, please.
Yes, I think that, as Sheila mentioned, the deal for the county to have families take care in in-home services, but in the DCFS, the mismatch is out of control. We need to solve it. But the big issue here is really about how can we fix these issues, and it's an executive kind of function. We talked about the 3 functions of the Board of Supervisors. Working on a consensus basis is problematic because everybody has a good idea. So I favor more of an input decision-maker model, where we take input from all of the characters, and then somebody makes a decision, and that somebody could be a czar, or it could be an appointee among the very smart people from the commissions, which is a very good way to go, because then there's a kind of camaraderie, and that could work. I also think that we need to chase a greater than model, which is where we can expect more on a regular basis. I asked the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday on the DCFS report day when Zev made those remarks, what did you do today, tomorrow, and the next day to solve these problems, because they will roll it back for a month or 6 months, and that's a problem.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so now we're going to have a practice in discipline. If any of you love wait, don't tell me as much as I do, we're going to have a lightning round. So this is a yes or no question. You may answer with one word only. Ready? Would you support expanding the size of the Board of Supervisors? Yes or no? Eric?
Yes.
Bobby?
Yes.
Good. Sheila?
No.
John?
No.
Pamela?
Yes.
Wow, I'm impressed.
The yeses have it.
Okay, I've got a follow-up
People
question.
voted against it.
Another lightning round. Okay, again, this is a quick answer, but a longer lead-in. Listen to the entire lead-in before answering. Your answer will be a number.
No.
Here's the lead-in. Each supervisor represents approximately 2 million people. For purposes of comparison, the state of Wyoming, with a population of 564,000, has the following: 2 senators, a congressman, 5 statewide elected officials, 60 House members, 30 state senators, and only 49 school districts. What do you think would be the appropriate size of a Board of Supervisors for a county with a population of 10 million people? Or stated another way, what number of supervisors would it take for the people of LA County to be adequately represented? So all we want now is a number. Pamela.
Has to be an odd number. So I would go with, for less than $1 million each, 11.
John.
9.
Eric.
16.
Sheila. 5. Bobby.
9.
Very good, you guys. It is, question number 6. It is well accepted that the LA County jail system is the largest mental health facility in the state, if not the nation. At a sheriff's forum last week, we, the audience, were told that the office could only find 200 available spaces for the approximately 2,000 currently incarcerated, where they could be safely treated and confined. This is not healthy for either the system or the inmates/patients. What would be the first thing you would do to remedy this situation? John, please.
A lot of the mental health issues around the county jails revolve around alcoholism and drug addiction. So I mean reallocating a lot of the funding that currently exists for the jail incarceration system and redirecting it into rehabilitation facilities. Alcohol and drugs takes up a large percentage of the court, jail, and sheriff's time. My day job is I'm an attorney in the criminal justice system on the defense side. And so I have learned firsthand that alcohol and drugs consume so much of our resources, and people don't get better when they just go in and out of the jail system where they serve 10% of their sentence. There's no deterrent there. That money should be reinvested into alcohol and drug rehabilitation, realizing that the biggest need is in beds. Alcohol, 30 days, you can get sober. Crystal methamphetamine or heroin takes at least 6 months of continuous work and rehabilitation to get better. And we don't have any systems set up for the more serious drugs that are now currently on our streets. So it does mean taking the money that's currently allocated to the sheriff and moving it over to drug and alcohol rehabilitation.
Thank you very much. Bobby, please.
I agree with everything John just said. I think it's an essential idea to recognize that we've learned a lot about mental health in the last 30 years, and incarcerating, jailing people who have mental illnesses is not a good idea. Although your question says it's widely known, in my coffees that I've held around the district, I don't think it honestly is that widely known. Many people are not aware of how many mentally ill people are in the jail system, and when you do tell it to them, people shake their heads like this, and they know that these folks should not be put into a new jail, which is the current proposal to spend $1.9 billion on a new downtown jail, which will keep the mentally ill in a jail system. I think there's plenty of money in $1.9 billion to figure out some of the things that John mentioned about treating mentally ill people in a secure way in the community and community mental health care facilities. We can't continue for another 20 years doing studies and building new jails where those mentally ill people stay in jail. It's a very, very bad result.
Thank you, Bobby. Pamela, please.
Yeah, I think one of the ways we have to look at this is not just beds, but different ways of getting these people help. The AB 109 funds from the state, I don't think they've been used. A lot of these convicted people are not a threat to society. So why are we putting them in a jail? Why are we not thinking about using technology like those bracelets, et cetera, so they can live at home, but at the same time we know if there's another crime committed and they know that they will be tracked. I think there's alternatives like that, but we have to look at those alternatives and not just incarcerating them, but getting them better. And that should be a priority. I think that we need those mental health facilities to improve access and the ability to get help. And not only that, but after they get out and then they're done with their time, what are we doing to integrate them back into society? So we need to place resources through Homeboys Industries, et cetera, to give these people a leg back into society, let them know they're valued, and then in that way, hopefully, they won't commit further crimes.
Thank you, Pamela. Eric, please.
Let's be very clear. Public safety is critically important, but the current system is in deep trouble. It's actually 1.7 billion, Bobby, not 1.9 billion that they're proposing, but it's actually 2.5 billion when you include the bond cost for a new jail. But to do such a thing is an irresponsible act, because we have, according to the James Austin report that was commissioned by the ACLU, adequate facilities by moving the public safety characters who really need to be in jail into jail, and the people who do not, which is a tremendous number of mentally ill, of characters who are homeless and got into trouble. We can do much better with reentry programs, with diversion programs. These special drug courts that John referenced are very, very effective at making decisions that are in the interest of the constituents, but also of the individual. And above all, I would tell the sheriff that he cannot simply expand programs that don't have results. And I would hold the line. The budget, the Board of Supervisors is frequently folding.
Thank you, Eric. Sheila.
This is really an issue for a system and needs systemic change. More than half of the prisoners in the county jail are waiting for their trial. They have not been convicted of anything yet. They have been accused. So there are mental health, people from the Department of Mental Health in the courts to talk to the prisoners right away. There should be people from the Department of Mental Health in the jail to continue with the prisoners so that there is a system working following the individual. The transition from jail, which is happening quite a bit for low-level offenders because they're serving less time, they need help moving into supportive housing. We talk about the homeless population. You'd be amazed at how many of the homeless population on Skid Row have just come out of jail. They are, yes, they have mental health issues, but you need a system to work that way. And that's the way I would like to work with the Department of Mental Health, to think of this population systemically and along a timeline as they're accused, as they're in jail, as they get out.
Thank you. In the county, there are currently 34,000 4-year-olds without a space in any preschool classroom. What will you do to address this gap in service? Pamela, please.
Yeah, I think, again, we have to be creative. We have these community libraries. Why not open them up for those 4-year-olds who can't get in and provide teachers to give them the opportunity to learn to read? I think it needs to be a priority, and that's one of the things I would do, is open up those library spaces because we have that asset. In addition, there are also mobile bookmobiles. I think another thing we can do is go out to some of those communities that maybe the library's not close by and put those bookmobiles out there so those kids can go into the bookmobile, get educated at how to read, write, and arithmetic at 4. Once again, it comes back to from 2 to 5 is one of the most important times in a child's life because that's when they're wired. We need to prioritize that and give them the services and the education to ensure that Los Angeles County tomorrow is better than it is today.
Thank you, Pamela. Sheila, please.
Well, if you think of a need for 34,000 children, think much larger in terms of the need 20 years ago, before we had attention to this matter, before we had special funding streams, before we had spaces that we have now. What we need to do is build on our successes in terms of how we have identified these spaces using nonprofits, using schools. I believe the funding is really there. It has not gotten out the door fast enough. It is not prioritized in many areas. But I want to say one thing about our district, about the 3rd district. The other districts think we're all rich. And we don't, I'm serious, and we don't need the money. I had experience protecting this area. My Senate district was 1 million people from sort of being robbed by other districts by indicating we are not all rich. We have the same needs. Look at us across our entire geography. And it's not only in the Northeast Valley. Think of us here. Have a fire in Malibu and people living in their cars are coming down. I would protect this district, but work together to find those seats.
Thank you, Sheila. Bobby, please.
I'm glad Sheila referred to the time before we had the money when I'm happy to say my dad put the name Head Start on this concept. Prior to that, it was not, I would say, marketed as well as he figured out how to market it when he started Head Start as part of the war on poverty and was able to pass that legislation. I don't fully agree that the funding is there. I think the funding is under attack. Paul Ryan is holding hearings every day in the Congress, it seems to me, about how to zero out Head Start funding and saying that it's ineffective, and right-wing think tanks are generating studies showing about the ineffectiveness of preschool education. I think you've got a battle on your hands. I want to be in that battle with you, but it needs leadership and toughness. We have to go to D.C. with all the federal officials of Los Angeles and the state of California, for that matter, prove that it works, and get more money. It's not going to be easy. I think it's not about reallocating money. It's about holding on to the money we've got, making the case for this in a very, very hard-headed way, which is what I've had a lot of, I hope, experience in doing.
Thank you, Bobby. Eric, please.
Well, first of all, I have to confess that hearing that number, 34,000 seats that are needed for kids to get nursery school, is extremely painful to hear with a straight face. And the idea that there's a solution that I could propose today immediately is just, it's hard. I will say that by funding programs through fiscal responsibility is the only way to do it. And unfortunately, the CEO announced, 2 weeks ago, as the budget process has just begun, so we can fight for this now, that we are, AAA bond rating, like the gentleman to my right announced regularly. The county is widely applauded for its fiscal responsibility, and yet if 34,000 vacancies or holes in our program exist, I'm mortified by that number.
Thank you, Eric. John, please.
First of all, I think it's only fair that Bobby got to pull in Sergeant Shriver, since I referred to my grizzly mama bear, Latina mother, so attaboy. I wanted to create more preschools. If there's 34, you could create more preschools. My city actually is unlike the rest of the county. We only are, the percentage of families with children in my city is 6%. It's a city without children. But we have 4 elementary schools. So what we did is we started to bus in kids from other highly impacted areas into our city. And there, I believe, are some of the most spoiled kids around, because our city does help fund those schools. But we had to be creative and think outside the box. We have also created in our new park at Plummer Park a preschool there within the park, working with, again, contracting a nonprofit organization to set up a preschool. Even though there's no kids in our neighborhood, we're bringing them in. And so I think that we have to think outside of traditional silos about how to create more opportunity and not just limit ourselves to what's always worked. And those are just some of the ideas that I've experienced.
Thank you, John. Okay, another lightning round. One word, please. Would you support a county-wide tax to fund preschool, universal preschool? Yes or no? Sheila?
Yes, because that has to be voted on.
One word. Pamela?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Bobby?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Good. All right, now we're going to talk about transportation. The Board of Supervisors has a major role to play in public transportation across the county. Among the major concerns in this district are development of the Orange Line as light rail, the subway to the sea, and will it ever reach the sea, good, fast public transportation from the valley to the west side and LAX. What are your priorities with regard to public transportation across the county? Bobby, please.
Thank you. This is vitally important in the Valley, where I think it's fair to say they've received less of the transit funds from Measure R than other communities. Both the north-south connectors for them and the Orange Line, which you referenced, have to be built. I fully support another extension of Measure R to finance these. One of the things that people want is a tunnel that would go under the 405 to the airport. That needs to be a public-private partnership. I don't think it can be financed entirely with taxation funds, but we clearly all want a subway that goes to the airport. We want to be able to get off the train and go into the airport. That's a competitive thing that the area needs to be competitive with the city. We're in the most competitive economy in the history of the world. We're competing for talent with London, Paris, New York. We need a transportation system that functions on a world-class basis. We don't have that now. I fully support expediting and doing on-time, on-budget construction of those systems so that my kids can compete and live in LA.
Thank you, Bobby. Sheila, please.
I also support the line that would go from the valley to the airport, and I think the public-private partnership will be necessary. They want to build toll lanes in the tunnel for cars next to the train to help finance it. I support that. I support the subway. It's going to the VA, I'm pretty sure. I don't know whether there will be funds. I know there won't be in the new Measure R to go all the way to the ocean, especially since the expo is just getting finished. To me, the most important priority is getting people out of their cars when these trains are built. How many of us are going to take the expo if we can't park or get to it? So what I would prioritize, because one of the supervisors said we're in the train business, not the parking business, I would prioritize making it possible for us to get there, to park there, to valet, bike valets, bike lockers, vans that would go around our neighborhoods like they do downtown to take us there, because I want to use it. And if you can get me out of my Porsche, my old, ancient, 50-year-old Porsche, I can get you out of your car.
Thank you, Sheila. Eric, please.
This is the LA Up Forum, so I would certainly push for strollers in every community. I think that that's critical. No, but seriously, the Valley's Orange Line, Red Line is the most widely used system, and I think Sheila's point about how can we get people to opt into these systems is critically important. The other issue is the equity issues, because though a tunnel through the Sepulveda Pass would take 25 years and cost a bloody fortune that we couldn't afford, it would be nice. But I do think that what we need to be thinking about is people who use public transportation and expanding that, which means buses. And one of the other candidates mentioned the other night that our bus service has been reduced dramatically. And in fact, people who had a functional bus system would actually be much cheaper. There would not be 20 years of digging in the ground. And the people who use the public transportation, and more people would use it. If you told me that I could get from Brentwood to Dodger Stadium in 45 minutes on a fast bus, I would say, done, because it's an hour and 45 minutes in your car. So there are many things to do. Thank you.
Thank you. John, please.
I think I'm the only native Angelino. I mean, I was born here, raised here, been here my whole life. And the thought of a subway in Los Angeles just seemed to be some dream that we would ever get here. It's happening. It's been happening now for 20 years. And it's unbelievable that it's happening to somebody that was born and raised here. A lot of the inefficiencies with the current system is that out of political compromise, we've not developed a system that works and gets people to where they want to go. It's why the Orange Line is above ground instead of under the ground. It's why the Green Line doesn't connect to the Norwalk Union Station where it connects with trains. It's why we don't have a metro stop at LAX Airport, because out of political compromise, people were willing to sell ourselves short, not thinking long term. That can't happen for the next 20 years. We've got to rethink this. And public-private partnerships, financing is the biggest issue. We have to get another version of Measure R on the ballot in 2016, tax ourselves an additional half-cent, so we have the funding to do this. The big issue is parking. As somebody who's tried to use the subway, the problem for working-class people like me, I actually have to work every day, is I can't usually park whenever I want to get on the metro.
Thank you, John. Pamela, please.
Yeah, I think it's important we look at Los Angeles' history and how we did have rail at one point. And who bought that? The tire companies. And why did they buy that? So they could get rid of the rail transportation. So I think it's important we look at this in the macro level, and we put the people before the corporations, and we serve the people if elected. I think one of the things we need to do is look at the $40 billion that we passed in 2008. How have we been using that? Have we been smart with that money? One of the things I've just learned from Zev Yaroslavsky's website is that with respect to the subway from the sea to the subway to the sea, we're short 50 to 60 rail cars because we contracted with a Japanese company that won't deliver. So we need to look at that. And what is the Metro doing? They're sending our people from Metro over to Japan to meet with these corporations. That's crazy. I think what we need to do with this money is be smarter, hire local. If we can't hire local, at least hire in the United States.
Thank you, Pam. One of the faster growing homeless populations is families with children. Yet many shelter programs do not support keeping families together, especially families with teenage boys. How could county programs and policies address this issue? John, please.
Good question. The homeless population, we have to get beyond just building shelters. In my city, we just started going directly into building housing for the homeless, working with the United Way. A lot of homeless families with children are people who would make best use of facilities just like this. That means working with local government, because the county doesn't build housing, cities build housing. And it means having to give incentives to city council people, like the three of us here, to want to do the right thing and build housing for the homeless. People Assisting the Homeless Path is a service that we use. I give them $500,000 a year, but they only hold people for 30 days. And for a mother with a child or families with teenage boys, it's not going to suffice. They just need housing, and they need it now. And so it just means taking the political courage to do the right thing and just build housing for the homeless. Are we going to solve every homeless individual's problem? No. There are some people, as we read in the LA Times recently, that want to stay on the street. But for a mother with a child who wants safety over their roof, a roof over their heads, just build the housing. Just do it.
Thank you, John. Pamela, please.
Yeah, I can tell you a story. My father was one of 13 children, and his father died when he was very young, probably from having so many kids. But his mother had to make the choice of 5 of those kids were sent to an orphanage, and the others stayed with her. They separated the family. It was horrible. I think if your question was about these teenage kids that maybe some foster parents only want 1, not 2, well, then they don't get them. And if we can't keep these kids together, this family unit together, then we need to send them to a facility like there's one Child Help has in Beaumont, California, where they can be kept together. Because I think those bonds are so thick that's our duty as LA County Board of Supervisors to keep that unit together. And whatever we have to do, whether it be to not sending them to that particular family, to a facility where they can keep together, that's our priority. And that's what I would do if elected.
Thank you, Pamela. Sheila, please.
Well, there are 88 cities in Los Angeles County, and they are not stepping up to the plate individually. John already said there are very few children in West Hollywood, so no matter how much housing they're building, it doesn't seem like it's housing for families with children, and I know they're trying. Santa Monica has tried. Malibu tries, but it's insufficient. It's the responsibility of county government to make certain that the money gets out the door in conjunction with cities to sweeten the pot, but it's really not city government that's doing it. And what we need to do is rapid rehousing for those who are newly homeless so they get right back into a place to live, supportive services for housing for those who are more chronically homeless. Fortunately for us, those programs are beginning. What we need to do is scale up, scale up, scale up. As I said before, build on our successes because we're having them. And we can serve every homeless person in this county if we emphasize permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, get those services, we can do it.
Thank you, Sheila. Bobby.
Well, I disagree about Santa Monica. Since I was in the Santa Monica government, I know that Santa Monica has succeeded at this by building an enormous amount of affordable housing. That's why homelessness in Santa Monica is down as compared to other places in the county where homelessness is up. So I feel I have had the local experience to get this done. I know what worked. In particular, I know with regard to vets and women vets who are living in cars with kids, I know what is necessary there. I have pressured the VA to house those women vets all over the county, not only here in West LA, but in Long Beach and in the Valley. This has been successful. It's not a failure. I think much more needs to be done with the absence of redevelopment money. We have to find the money to build supportive housing units. That's absolutely correct. And the county does need to work with the 88 cities to enable them all to build that new housing. We know the model. It needs to be executed on, and it needs to be executed with a sense of urgency for these young kids, and they have to be kept with their families. I entirely agree with what John said on that.
Thank you, Bobby. Eric Preven.
I thought I understood that it was about how do we keep families together, if there were a foster kid who couldn't be, but the homelessness issue is, of course, what creates that situation.
Actually, it related to shelters.
To shelters. Okay. Well, there's something called the Family Solutions Center that has been set up by the CDC. I think Gloria Molina and the other supervisors got it started. It's promising. It is a program that seeks to manage the county silos so that the services can be applied to the problems, just like keeping families together. Also, I think counties individually, county departments individually, including, like, for example, the health services group, Mitch Katz has done a great job by earmarking X number of beds, I think it's like 100 or 60 beds, in a rundown building, because he knows that the cost of a homeless individual in the emergency room is exorbitant, and that the 100,000 home program that was on 60 Minutes shows, with beyond the shadow of a doubt, that people in shelter become a different person. You look at the before and after pictures, and it blows your mind. A week later. So the issues that...
Thank you, Eric. Sorry.
That's okay.
Here in Santa Monica, we've been working on a Cradle to Career initiative that utilizes collective impact to address a common agenda. The second Youth Wellbeing Report Card was recently published. Santa Clara has a countywide report that covers much the same areas. In your role as supervisor, would you embrace and work to expand this approach countywide here as well? Please expand on your thoughts. Sheila, please.
Absolutely. I think it's been a wonderful thing. When Pam presented that report, I think we were all very proud of the progress that we've made in Santa Monica. The best thing about it, though, is that it also shows us what next steps need to be. I definitely would like a report. Really, it's a kind of how healthy are our kids, and I don't mean just physically. I mean in terms of the whole aspect of the children. I would love to see that report countywide, and I think we can do it. It takes leadership to put such a thing in place because of the disparity of all the various cities in the county. And as I said, we can't really rely on our cities to do it because you get a little here, you get a little there. Santa Clara has been a great county for doing this, but they're a much smaller county. So we have to scale up, and again, I think it takes leadership. I've shown some leadership about many of these issues, and I would bring people together. We definitely would have a countywide report.
Thank you, Sheila. Eric, please.
Yeah, I think a countywide report would be great. You know, the problems that we're facing are, once again, and this is a core issue, ultimately land on the supervisor's desk. And one of the problems with, for example, the Blue Ribbon Commission report was that this report landed on their desk, and yet as it was being formed, you could listen if you attended the meetings that I did, how the commissioners themselves were anxious not to leave the oversight to the supervisors, that it be left just off to the side to an individual who they could basically fire, which is what we have seen, unfortunately, in repetition. So if elected as a supervisor in this role, I would not only demand that we get a county report on these issues, but I would stay focused on the greater than idea, that we can improve it on an incremental but important daily basis, and that the status quo in government at the moment is bring it back in 6 months and let's see how we're doing. I think that that's a mistake, and I think that we just hired another group on Tuesday, which I'll tell you about later.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Pamela, please.
I would absolutely support extending this report on a countywide basis, but more importantly, I think we have to make this report something that we can lead the nation with, and we can show how when we take care of these kids 1 and under, when we give them medical screenings, when we give them educational opportunities, we create a society that is a beacon of hope for the United States of America. So this is bigger than just Los Angeles County. This is about showing the world how when you invest in children, you get back so much more at the end of the day. So as a supervisor, I think Sheila was right. It's the leaders that you elect who are going to either prioritize children or not. So if elected, I promise to you, those children will be a priority. And not only will those children be good, those children will become great leaders, and they will lead us to the future, and they will make Los Angeles better tomorrow than it is today.
Thank you, Pamela. Bobby, please.
Here again, I think I disagree a little bit with Sheila, because I like the idea of relying on the cities. Some cities have done well, some cities maybe have not done as well. But I think for the county to tell the cities what to do is a bad idea. I think leadership means getting people to see a vision and want to do what is in the vision. I've seen at the local level myself here in Santa Monica how effective this city is on this issue. By planning, we have an arts plan, we have this plan. We're great at that. I think that other cities will, if they're convened in a proper way and respected and listened to as to what their particular issues are, and I'd say this on a countywide basis, not just in the 3rd district, I think you can get support for kids. But I'm personally tired of people talking about kids, and I'm for the kids, and nothing happens. You have to make things happen. They're not going to happen by more rhetoric about kids. You have to make them happen, and you've got to get investors, which are the other cities, investing in your vision.
Thank you, Bobby. All right, so our last question,
I
And
didn't
it's
get a
Goldilocks.
chance to answer that question.
And yet
He's
I
got
crossed
some
out your
excellent
name.
comments.
I'm so embarrassed. I do this every panel. I do this one time. Forgive me.
No problem. This is actually an issue where I fundamentally disagree with Sheila. We have to rely on the cities. We have to rely on the cities. Famous quote by George Washington, government is like fire. You need some of it to stay warm and to cook. You have too much of it, you burn down the house entirely. And that's the problem with too big of a government. We have a county of 10 million people. And to think that 5 women and men are going to have the ability to put their vision on 10 million people is not possible. The 88 cities are your closest contact to communities. You have to rely on local government in order to implement any of these changes. We can't take a report that was developed in Santa Monica or Malibu or West Hollywood and say, oh, here, Compton, try this. Or Huntington Park, you are the densest city west of the Mississippi River. Try what we did here on the west side. We're dealing with problems of poverty here. We can't even talk about college. We can't even feed our kids. So we can't rely on other people's vision to implement local change. We have to rely on the cities.
Thank you, John, and please forgive me again. All right, so here is, as I said before, our last question, and it's a Goldilocks question. Some feel the county CEO has slowly been stripped of the powers granted when the office was established, thus creating an imbalance of power between the supervisors and the CEO. Do you think the CEO has too much power, too little power, or about the right balance with the Board of Supervisors? And we'll start with John.
Too little power. We have 5 supervisors who have been in place for more than 20 years, who run each of their supervisorial districts like fiefdoms. And it's apparent. That's where a lot of the problems, the root of a lot of our problems, we don't have any one person in charge. And the current CEO is running around with 5 bosses who all have different ideas, and we're not able to implement any fundamental change. Local government, which is often reflected in a city manager, local government position, really has to rely on having one person as the decision maker. And I think the 5 supervisors have vested so much power currently in themselves, there's no accountability in the system. So hopefully with this new set of supervisors, if there are new people coming up from local government who've had the experience of putting a person in charge to make the hard decisions, I think the county will be better off. Again, it is the largest bureaucracy in the world. The largest bureaucracy in the world has to have somebody accountable that can be fired when he or she falls short of goals that we need to attain.
Thank you, John. Eric, please.
Well, this is an issue that I track very, very closely. And Bill Fujioka is obviously a very competent guy. That's the CEO of LA County. And the 5 Board of Supervisors have been in office for nearly 20 years. So it's what needs to happen, in my opinion, is the supervisors, and it will all change over the next couple of years, there'll be 5 new supervisors, need to take a much more executive role. By leaving Mr. Fujioka in the position that he's in, I like to call these group a sort of partners in crime, because you can't do anything without the CEO, but at the same time, the CEO is focused on serving many little silos, and he should not be given the oversight of an important project. In fact, they tried with the DCFS and then had to take it away from him, as you recall, and now we're facing, 4 years later, a blisteringly bad report, and there's serious consideration of having his integration services unit that's been in place for 10 years taking over. It's a disaster. So I think that the solution, is to be discussed.
Sheila, please.
Well, I hate to say this, but there's a fundamental inconsistency in saying that cities are better and then saying that a bunch of people who make a collective decision should turn over all the power to their, city manager? I mean, in essence, there are 2 different functions we're talking about for the county here, as you pointed out, the executive branch and the legislative branch. The supervisors are the legislative branch in that they set the policy. They do collectively, but by vote, by 3 votes, tell the CEO what the policy must be. The CEO's job is implementation. It's not a free hand, free of policy. The CEO implements by telling the directors of each department what they must do to carry out the policy, what they must do to spend the budget correctly. The leadership is in the supervisors, and they do take votes Yes, they may pick up the phone, but Bill Fujioka doesn't have to do what this one says and that one says. He has to do what the votes tell him to do. So I think that he has just enough.
Thank you. Bobby?
Again, we're back on the same disagreement. And the way city government does in fact work is the council votes a policy and then the city manager has unfettered authority to execute it. That is absolutely not the case in the county. Each one of the supervisors has executive authority themselves, and they do execute it themselves. That does not happen in a city. In fact, it's illegal in a city for a member of a city council to tell any department head. In fact, you're, in theory, not allowed to call a department head yourself. You have to work through the city manager. These supervisors call department heads themselves. That's a very different system. It needs to that amount of meddling in things needs to decrease. One of the most important decisions you make is who you hire. And not micromanaging good people is very, very important. People will not work if they're micromanaged, if they're good. I have a lot of experience in hiring, I hope, good people. Sometimes I made mistakes, but I know when I have a good one to let them do it themselves.
Thank you, Bobby. Pamela, please.
Yeah, I guess mine's a hybrid answer because I think you both make good points. But I think the most important thing is the CEO is not elected by the people. And so therefore, the accountability should be with the people. And like Sheila said, it's going to take 3 votes, not 1, except for the slush fund, to do whatever you want with. So it's not so much an issue of one supervisor doing everything he or she wants to do. That being said, I do agree with Bobby and John that sometimes it's best not to meddle. And whoever's elected to represent us has to have the faith and confidence in the CEO once we set the policy to implement it correctly. And I don't think it's the supervisor's job. They're busy enough doing other things to start telling the CEO where to spend these pennies or that pennies. So if elected, I think what I would do is look at that. I would say too much, too little, just enough. I would say giving him maybe a little bit more autonomy, but at the same time making sure he implements the policies of the board.
Thank you, Pamela. Okay, we have now concluded the time for questions, and we'll turn to closing statements. Candidates, remember that this is your time to comment, rebut, augment, or clarify any topic raised during the forum, or to tell the audience watching here and online why they should vote for you. You each have 90 seconds, and we'll speak in the reverse order of opening statements. So Pamela, please lead us off.
I want to thank you all for coming here. I think there's something Winston Churchill said as to why I'm running. He said, you make a living by what you get, and you make a life by what you give. I am running for this office to give back, to make LA County better tomorrow than it is today, to be a voice for those people who don't feel like they have a voice, to listen to those people who aren't being heard, as been articulated in so many of the commission and blue ribbon reports. What I can promise to you is that I will be an agent of change. Our campaign, Team Love LA, has decided to take money out and put love in so the citizens in LA win. We urge you to get involved in not only this race, but all of the races. We have seen a dangerous trend to spend in political campaigns. The last LA City Mayor election, the 2 candidates spent over $7 million, but 70% of the people in Los Angeles didn't even vote. Los Angeles, we have a problem. How can we engage our community? How can we make it as exciting to get your voter registration card as it is to get your driver's license? What are we not doing to engage the future, to engage the youth, to the seniors? I hope to be that agent of change, because when you vote for me, you vote for yourself, because if elected, I am going to represent you, not special interests, but you.
Thank you, Pamela. Bobby.
I want to thank Ann and Sandy for supervising us all, and LA Up, the hard workers there. It's terrific work that you all are doing, and you need to be commended for it. I reiterate that I'm a problem solver. When I got to Santa Monica, we had the most polluted beach water in the state. We had a disaster on the beach. We had special ed issues in our town. With my council, we solved these problems. They don't exist anymore. The special ed stuff has been ratified. The beach has been cleaned up. The beach house has been built. I'm that kind of a person. I think I can address these problems, and I have a record of addressing them. I'm a father. I have a special child. She's 5 years old. I know how it feels when your kid doesn't get something, and I know that what's happening in poorer areas that John has highlighted is absolutely unconscionable. It cannot continue. We need to change things up on a very urgent basis. The idea that there are 34,000 slots that are needed that haven't been funded is completely outrageous and ridiculous. It needs to be fixed. Kids in foster care don't get proper education. It's ridiculous. It's got to be fixed, and it's got to be fixed right away. And my special interest, as I hope many of you know, is in homelessness, and particularly kids of homeless women, combat vets, living in cars all over town, getting no education whatsoever, having to walk to school, be embarrassed in school. This is a responsibility of the federal government at a $79 billion VA budget. We have to work with them to make sure that they figure out how to look after these homeless women vets. And I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. John, please.
Thank you all for being here this morning. I just wanted to comment that I think Los Angeles is at a crossroads. And by Los Angeles, I mean greater Los Angeles. Are we going to go the way of Detroit and other cities and places around this country that are in despair? Or are we going to go into some new form of urbanism? We have a huge challenge here. We have 10 million people. We're the second largest urban area in the nation, aside from New York. We have 88 cities. We have probably the most diverse part of the world on the planet. It's the new Constantinople, where all races and cultures and ethnicities and religions come together and commingle. And so what is the new vision of urbanism given our unique place in the world? The system that we have in place is lumbering. It is bloated. It is old. It is like the old Politburo. I mean, it doesn't function in the new vision of urbanism. And so we have to look at how we make fundamental change in Los Angeles County. A lot of the monies that the county receives are federal and state monies that are mandated to be spent in certain ways. So a lot of things we have to do. But there are discretionary funds that we do have that we have to decide how to do things differently. The reason that my city has $100 million in reserve, it's not by accident. It's because we always plan for growth and change. But we took the additional tax revenues we received from that growth and change, and we banked it. Because we knew there'd come a rainy day when we would need it, either for shortfalls or to do some new capital improvements of something bold and grand, like transportation systems. And the only way we're going to get there is to think differently than what's been utilized for the past 20 years with the current Board of Supervisors. I ask for your vote on June the 3rd.
Thank you, John. Eric, please.
I've been listening carefully to this conversation about the city versus the county, and John says my city is a wonderful place with 6% of the population are children, and it makes me confused because I believe that my county, or our county, is in real crisis, and I think that the solution to that problem is in better and more focused civic engagement. I believe that the people in this room, and I'd like to thank LA Up, first of all, for putting on such a nice forum, are the answer in a way. And by that I mean that the Board of Supervisors have established a system that virtually disregards public input. A lot of decisions are made in an insular fashion in the back room by organizations jockeying for funding, and Bill Fujioka presides over a lot of that. I have been very active as a watchdog, looking out for the public's interest. And that process is something that I would continue if elected to the Board of Supervisors, because the public's perspective is often sidelined. And there are many specific examples. The county golf courses, which are a very lucrative revenue driver, were handed over without competitive bidding to one of the supervisor's son's client, Matt Kanabe. And this was done virtually, weaving in and out of what's legal. And it did not benefit the public at all. It benefited banks in New York, who then flipped those contracts after that was secured. I would fight for the public if elected, and I will do so on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Sheila, please.
Well, thanks to the League of Women Voters and LA Up for sponsoring this and for all of you for being here. I grew up in LA, and when I was an actor as a kid, I didn't think very much about other people. But when I went to UCLA, I was a unicamp counselor. I went to Vietnam with the USO and met 10,000 men who actually didn't exactly know why they'd been drafted and sent there, what were the principles they were supposed to be fighting for. And it changed my life amazingly. And since then, from my early 20s, I've really been devoted to trying to help other people who want to change their lives as well, and maybe need even more help than I needed and got. So I've been in public service for quite a while. As I said, I chaired the Ocean Park Community Center here for homeless services, the Sojourn Shelter for battered women's services, and then more issues of what people used to call women's rights. And then you were very kind and elected me in '94 to the Assembly, and again in 2000 to the Senate, and I served for 14 years, learning about the exact issues that the county oversees: health and human services, mental health, transportation. And when you talk about children, I think all of these children are my children. And I think of them as my children. And I want for them health and a future and a good education. And that's what I will fight for. And I will bring my leadership to do that. And I would appreciate your vote on June 3rd.
Thank you, Sheila. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Santa Monica and LA Up, we want to thank all of you for taking part in this candidates forum and for stepping forward to run for office. And we thank you, the audience, for taking time out of your busy schedules to watch and learn. We hope this forum will help you decide who to vote for. We want to thank Mobion for taping this forum from rebroadcast on LA Up's YouTube channel. This YouTube channel may be accessed by going to laup, all caps, .net, and clicking on the YouTube icon that is on the home page. There will also be a link from the League of Women Voters of Santa Monica's website, which may be found at lwv, upper caps, Santa Monica, lower caps, .org. For more information about the candidates, you can go to the League of Women Voters Smart Voter website at smartvoter.org, where you can enter your address to find out what will be on your ballot. A final note: it's up to us collectively to make democracy work. Someone once said elections are won by those who show up. Whether you vote by absentee ballots or go to the polls on June 3rd, your vote counts. Thank you.
Wow, you're driving to Palos Verdes right now?
That's where I came from.
But you know, I mean, that's such a valuable.